I think it was initially incredibly hard for my team to really hear difficult feedback about the processes we were running, right? And in such a public forum. Strong advice to any CHRO with any resources is please invest in a people analytics function.
But I think we're in a time where, and I read this somewhere, that 58% people would trust a stranger more than their own direct manager.
Listening is not just about asking people and then forgetting about it. It's also about closing loops.
As I start, I want to acknowledge something today, and this is very special for me. And I was discussing this with Sunil off stage, and I wrote about this yesterday. That the last time I came to Singapore 5 years back, I had to spend 3 months of my salary to make it here. And it is an absolute honor, privilege, and a grateful moment for me to be addressing you folks here with someone like Sunil on stage. So as we begin, I want us to understand each other outside of work, and especially someone like Sunil, because everyone knows you're the CHRO of Gojek. But who is Sunil outside of work? What is your passion outside of work, if I may ask?
I don't have hobbies, I have micro obsessions. So I get obsessed about like a thing for a period of time. And right now it happens to be mechanical watches. I was very, very fascinated by the fact that our entire civilization before the 70s ran on mechanical time and watches. So I'm studying how to build a watch, and I'd like to build one by the end of the year.
We've been speaking about listening culture as a topic, right? And what I've mostly noticed is whenever I speak to any CHRO about a listening culture, they're always moving into an HRMS or moving in out of one. They're focused on performance appraisals, and they don't have time to focus on a listening culture. So why is it an urgent priority for you at Gojek to even focus on a listening culture?
Our vision is that all our people should feel inspired to do their best work every day. And a big part of making that happen is giving them voice, authorship, and agency, right? You're not going to feel inspired to do your best work if you don't have those three things. And listening allows us to enable that for people. Second thing is it's in our DNA. Our founders from day one always listened to our people, and that never really went away. It became entrenched in our culture and values. I'm curious about inFeedo and you. Like, why is this important to you?
I think it started when I was 18 years old, and that's almost 10 years back. And something that's always bothered me is most of us subconsciously accepted that Monday mornings are terrible. We've branded it as Monday morning blues. I don't understand why we're okay with that. And post the pandemic, I've noticed that every single day feels like a Monday morning. We struggle to wake up. And that's a problem I felt is worth solving for, because how do you really make sure that employees are inspired to come to work every single day? I think it's worth diving into this space. It's worth taking out time to make sure at least 100 million employees feel like coming to work every single day. But what I want to focus now on, Sunil, is some hard metrics, right?
Yep.
Because listening culture can sound very broad, very philosophical. What hard metrics do you have to make sure you actually create a listening culture?
So, we track all the usual stuff. We track engagement, we track retention, we track, time to fill, hiring, all of the usual metrics. But we do a few other things. One is at each touch point in the employee life cycle, whether it's onboarding, offboarding, performance, etc., we actually poll our employees. Our employees are some of the most polled people on the planet, right? We ask them how they feel about everything, and we ask them how they experienced it. And then we close loop. Listening is not just about asking people and then forgetting about it. It's also about closing loop. So we look at the feedback and we change our processes, we change our OKRs, we change our goals, and we iterate over it. And some metrics we track, which may be unconventional. We track satisfaction score with interactions with the people team in Gojek, right? Now, we do surveys and we poll, right? But it's each survey, each poll asks different things. It's listening for different things. So engagement is listening for how you're experiencing the flow of work, your experience at work. Our experience survey tracks that. We don't call it an engagement survey, we call it an experience survey. So we listen for different things intentionally, and that helps us be super focused and respond to feedback. But we also recognize that, surveys are one-sided. You can only answer the questions that are asked. But you may have feedback about things that are not in the survey. So we have anonymous forums that are just open where people can ask any question they want. We really create an environment where people can ask questions and expect a response.
I want to focus on one thing you just said, right?
Yeah.
And I've never heard of this before, that you change your OKRs midway. So like if someone shares some form of feedback or as a part of your listening strategy, you have empowered your team to change OKRs midway.
Yeah. So listening to feedback is only effective if people are giving feedback, and people give feedback only if they know it's going to be acted on. So if you are so married to goals or OKRs that you've set at the start of the year that you're not going to have the flexibility to change course or change in response to the context of the environment, then people are going to stop telling you stuff. They'll be like, doesn't matter. You're only going to do whatever you plan to anyway.
You spoke about closing feedback loops, and I think that's very important because when you speak to most employees, right, their singular most important reason for not filling surveys or hating them is because they feel like nothing's going to happen. And I believe it's a lack of action fatigue and not a survey fatigue that employees face. And it's very critical to close those loops. Mm-hmm. But you also mentioned that you've switched from engagement to experience. And I think these are loosely used words out there. So how do you define experience for you?
At a very conceptual level, experience is how effectively are you engaging in your flow of work. It could be with the resources you have. It could be with the relationships you have at work. It could be with the clarity of vision and direction. It could be your own energy levels and well-being. We want to minimize the friction our employees experience as they go do the thing that they're good at, which is build amazing products, right? So can we remove as much organizational friction out of the way so they could go and solve those problems? That's what experience is for us.
For any feedback to come to you, including feedback around this stress, right, I think the foundation for it is truth, right? So how do you build trust required to even listen in the first place?
It's a chicken and egg problem, right? You need high psychological safety for people to give you honest feedback. And to get honest feedback, you need high psychological safety.
But at scale, right, with like thousands of people, how do you enforce trust?
You can't enforce trust. You win trust, you earn trust. And the way you do it is by being very deliberate and very clear, and maybe even almost symbolically so, that you will honor your commitment to a process. I'll give you an example. When we started doing the town hall, there was no questions. So we enabled anonymous feedback. And we said, we will answer the questions, there are no consequences. And we made it anonymous. And we got a lot of incredibly difficult questions. That was step one, which is, and then we answered the questions, we acted on the feedback that was there, we started responding to it. And slowly we encouraged a few employees to ask questions with their names attached. And then over time, we moved to a completely non-anonymous thing. We built psychological safety over time.
That's really interesting because I've seen a polarized set of CHRs, right? There are people who say anonymity is the way to go. And there are people who say that anonymity is actually like erodes trust, right? So there are two extremes. But it's the first time I'm hearing like a conscious strategy to start with anonymity and move away from it to gradually build trust. I think a very important part of that is for you to be able to hear that feedback.
Yeah.
And I think it's very easy to first convince yourself. But when I think you have a team of 150, 160 HR folks in Gojek, how do you train not just the HR, but the business heads, the managers, everybody to receive harsh feedback and make sure that they accept it the right way?
I don't think there's a single answer that works for everyone. What we did was role modeling. So our then CEO, Kevin, he took it on the jaw every time. The town hall is attended by 3,000, 4,000 people, right? Like this is not a small audience, and it's not intimate in any sense of the word. So there is a level of vulnerability that he made okay, and once his leaders saw that, they started replicating that. I think it was initially incredibly hard for my team. I just got like rated 2 out of 5. Your effectiveness is 0, right?
That's hard to hear.
So how do you graduate from that? So and I think what I call it exposure therapy, which is you just keep exposing the team and making it okay for the team to say, look, this is not an indictment of you as a person or you or your work, this is just how we've received it. We need to design our processes and our workflows better. Let's just take it for what it is and design our workflows better. And over time, people started seeing things were getting better, and they started giving positive feedback. That's nice to hear.
I've taken a mental note of exposure therapy. That sounds very fascinating. But what I'm not able to sort of like make up my mind on is, yes, we can do this for leaders, for business heads, for even the senior HR leadership. But I think we're in a time where, and I read this somewhere, that 58% people would trust a stranger more than their own direct manager. So how do you make sure that the middle management, the direct manager, is also getting this exposure therapy?
We have a 360-degree process for feedback. So our managers are not the only people who rate their employees. Employees rate their managers' effectiveness as well. So we have different touch points. Our experience surveys ask about manager effectiveness, about leader effectiveness. Our performance review process asks for upward feedback. So there is an accountability. Like if you have power, you need to be held accountable, and the people who hold you accountable have to be the people you exercise power over. So we get really hard feedback, and it forces you to reflect deeply on how can I be doing this differently and better as a leader, right? How can I anchor my team to either a point of continuous change, or how can I maybe design a strategy that's not going to be so vulnerable to the forces of change.
I like when you said continuous change, right? Because we're so focused on using words like continuous feedback, which is inward, continuous listening, which is inward. Continuous change is actually taking accountability of delivering on what you're listening. Have you experienced like any challenges in assimilating the culture and listening to different forms of feedback when it comes from different cultures, different ages, different genders?
We try and understand who's saying what so we can be more surgical and precise in the way we respond to that feedback. Some cultures are direct, like Singapore. Some cultures are slightly more indirect, like Indonesia. How do you navigate those nuances, and how do you be relevant as you navigate those nuances while also ensuring that people are experiencing very similar things? That's the challenge.
As we conclude today, I genuinely want to ask you, right? Like, what I've observed is at least 75% of CHROs in Southeast Asia are still in the journey of figuring out their continuous listening strategy. What would you like to say 1,000, 2,000 people listening to you right now?
It's worth the investment. And my strong advice to any CHRO with any resources is please invest in a people analytics function, because you need that level of thinking and that level of precision. So you're not doing things in a blunt axe way. You have to invest and be data-led in your responses. So it's a commitment to being a data-led function and an evidence-based function. And some organizations are data-led and evidence-based naturally. Some organizations are led by narratives and stories. So you have to choose which one you want to be. And that's if it's a CHRO who's listening to this, that's what I'd say to them.
I usually love to end with a fun question, and I'm going to put you on this spot here. Is there something you believe in that most other people, most other CHROs disagree with?
I'm going to do the drinking cup water. I think there's a conflation between the concepts of meritocracy and fairness. The two things are not the same. If you say my organization is meritocratic, it doesn't automatically mean it's a fair organization. It just means you consciously differentiate for competence or whatever you give merit to. I think that's something that a lot of my colleagues tend to conflate as similar concepts. Like, we're fair and meritocratic. They're two separate concepts. So that's my controversial thought for the day.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sunil. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for coming here today. Thanks a lot.